guest house light was off, but the lock clicked. I heard fabric rustle. Her silhouette moved through the vines, quiet as a thief, or someone who wished they were. My name is Russell Harrington. I'm 48, and I used to build bridges before I built this vineyard. Now I know which one lasts longer. The signs had been there for weeks. Susan's eyes would drift past me at dinner. Her phone stayed face down on every surface. Strange perfume lingered in our hallway, something expensive, something that wasn't hers. I'd been watching from the kitchen window when she slipped out. Black dress, careful steps, heading straight for the guest house we hadn't used in months. My boots made no sound on the gravel. 25 years of marriage teaches you how someone moves through darkness. The door was cracked open. I could see them through the gap. Susan sat on the old leather couch. A man I'd never seen before had his hand on her knee. His shirt was wrinkled, his smile too comfortable. There was no anger in me, just cold certainty, like when I used to check load calculations. The numbers either worked or they didn't. Irina stepped inside. Both of them froze. "Don't stop on my account," I said. My voice came out level, almost conversational. The man, tall, probably mid-30s, wearing a polo shirt that cost more than most people's rent, started to stand. I held up one hand. "Stay seated." I walked to the small wine rack in the corner, selected a bottle I'd been saving. Good vintage. Seemed appropriate. The corkscrew was right where it always was. I opened the wine with practiced movements, found 3 glasses in the cabinet, poured each one exactly half full. I handed the first glass to the stranger. His fingers shook slightly when he took it. The second glass went to Susan. Her hand trembled so hard I thought she might drop it. I kept the third for myself, pulled up a chair, and sat down across from them. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. "Interesting choice," I said, raising my glass slightly. Susan's face went white. The man, Chad I'd learn later, glanced toward the door like he was calculating distance. I took a slow sip. The wine was perfect, rich, complex, with just the right amount of bite. Neither of them touched theirs. "Russell, Susan started. "No need," I said, set down my glass and stood up. I looked at Susan for a long moment. 25 years of marriage, reduced to this. A stranger in our guest house, cheap wine glasses, and the sound of rain starting to fall. I walked to the door, then stopped. Turned back. "Lock up when you're done." The walk back to the main house felt like crossing a minefield, every step deliberate, every breath measured. I sat at the kitchen table as dawn crept through the windows. The house was quiet except for the coffee maker and the distant sound of the guest house door finally clicking shut. You know what's funny about being an engineer? You learn to see the cracks before the structure fails. I'd been seeing them for months. I just hadn't wanted to run the calculations. But now I knew exactly what needed to be done. The foundation was compromised. Time to rebuild from the ground up. Susan came through the front door at 6:17 a.m. Her dress was wrinkled, her makeup smeared. She didn't look at me. "Morning," she said, like nothing had changed. I poured myself another cup of coffee. The plan was already forming. Some bridges you repair, others you demolish and start over. This one was coming down. Susan made breakfast the next morning. Her voice was steady, but her hands were careful, like every movement needed rehearsal. "Coffee's fresh," she said, cracking eggs into the pan. The shells went into the trash with clockwork precision. I watched her perform this routine we'd done 1,000 times, but now it felt like watching a stranger wear my wife's face. The polo shirt guy, Chad, was nowhere to be seen. Smart man. I ate the scrambled eggs without tasting them. Susan sat across from me, picking at her toast like she was defusing a bomb. "I thought I'd check the inventory today," I said, casual as commenting on the weather. Her fork paused midair, just for a second. "That's nice, honey." 25 years of marriage and she'd never called me honey before noon. Some tells you can't hide. I finished my coffee and headed to the office. Time to run some numbers. The bank statements were where I'd left them, but the charges weren't what I remembered. Restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in San Francisco, a jewelry store in downtown Napa that specialized in gifts for the discerning gentleman. Guess what I was discerning? A pattern. The wine inventory was next. I'd built this collection over 15 years, every bottle cataloged, every vintage tracked. 3 cases of the 2015 Cabernet were missing. The good stuff. The bottles I'd been saving for special occasions. Apparently, Susan had found one. I pulled out the ledger, cross-referenced with the digital records. Someone had been creative with the bookkeeping. The invoices showed deliveries that never happened, purchases that redirected to addresses I didn't recognize. Dean Carson knocked on the office door around noon. My foreman had worked this land longer than I had owned it. "Got a minute, boss?" Dean was the kind of man who called a spade a spade. When he looked uncomfortable, I paid attention. "The consultant Susan hired," he said. "Chad something. Guy's been hanging around the warehouse a lot." I leaned back in my chair. Oh. Never seen him check the vines, never seen him in the fields. Hell, I asked him about bud break last week and he looked at me like I was speaking Chinese. Some wine consultant. Guy probably thought terroir was a type of dog. Anything else? Dean shifted his weight. "Yesterday, I saw him loading boxes into his car. Heavy ones. Didn't think much of it at the time." I nodded. "Thanks, Dean. Keep an eye on things." After he left, I did some more checking. The 2015 Cabernet wasn't just missing. It was gone, systematically, over the past 3 months. Same time frame as the mysterious restaurant charges. I opened our joint checking account online. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Hello account, opened 6 months ago. Susan's name on it, along with someone else's. Chad Miller. The deposits were small at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. But they'd gotten bigger, much bigger. The most recent transfer was $15,000, 0 cents, from our business account to theirs. I sat back in my chair. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes. That afternoon, Susan found me in the kitchen. She was wearing makeup and a dress I'd never seen before. "I've been thinking," she said. "Maybe we should consider selling the North Parcel." The North Parcel, 20 acres of prime Napa Valley land, worth more than my first house. Why? Chad thinks it's not productive enough. Says we could reinvest the money, make better returns. Chad thinks, the man who didn't know what bud break was. "That's interesting advice," I said. "I'll consider it." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good. I knew you'd see the sense in it." Ha! I watched her leave, then made a call. The county office was open until 5. "Planning and permits," the voice answered. "Hi, this is Russell Harrington. I own Harrington Vineyard. I need to update our business permits." 20 minutes later, I was driving into town. The county office was one of those government buildings that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1970. The clerk was helpful, pulled up all our records, showed me the permits and filings. "Has there been any recent activity on property transfers?" I asked. "Just want to make sure everything's current." She clicked through some screens. "Actually, yes. There's a preliminary inquiry on file. Someone requested information about subdividing your North Parcel." My chest tightened. "When?" 3 weeks ago. Filed by..." She squinted at the screen. "Chad Miller. Listed as your vineyard consultant." I thanked her and walked back to my truck. Sat there for a full minute, staring at the mountains. 3 weeks ago, right around the time Susan started talking about selling land. The betrayal was bigger than I'd thought. This wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. They were stealing my legacy, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. I'd spent 15 years building this vineyard from nothing. Every vine planted by hand, every barrel aged with patience, I'd learned from my father, and they were carving it up like a Thanksgiving turkey. I started the engine and drove home. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the vines gold. Beautiful land, worth fighting for. Susan was on the phone when I walked in. She ended the call quickly. "How was town?" she asked. "Productive," I said. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Susan breathed softly beside me, but I knew she wasn't sleeping either. Some foundations crumble slowly. Others collapse all at once. Mine had been eroding for months. I just hadn't seen the full damage until now. But here's the thing about being an engineer. You don't just identify the problem. You fix it. Timing matters. In the vineyard and in war, you let your enemy believe you're asleep before you strike. I spent the next 3 days building my case. Every document copied, every discrepancy photographed, every missing bottle cataloged. The office printer worked overtime. Bank statements, wine invoices, inventory logs, everything Susan and Chad thought they'd hidden in plain sight. My phone camera captured the altered ledger entries, date stamps, signature comparisons, transaction patterns that spelled out theft in black and white. They'd been sloppy. Criminals usually are. On Thursday morning, I made some changes. Passwords first. Every account, every system. Susan's laptop locked her out at 9 a.m. sharp. "The system's acting up," she said, standing in the office doorway. "I'll look into it," I replied, not looking up from my work. The vineyard profits got rerouted to a trust account, one I'd set up years ago for tax purposes, now serving a different function. Our joint checking account, frozen. Business necessity. I'd tell anyone who asked. Susan discovered that Friday afternoon. "Russell, there's something wrong with our account." "Bank error," I said. "Should be fixed Monday." Her face tightened, but she couldn't push too hard without revealing why she needed access. Dean knocked on the office door Saturday morning. "You wanted to see me, boss?" "Time for a surprise inventory check," I said. "Full warehouse audit. Start with the wine storage." Dean's eyes lit up. He'd been waiting for this. We walked through the warehouse methodically. Every rack, every case, every bottle accounted for. "Hey, boss," Dean called from the loading dock. "Chad's car is parked out here. Trunk's heavy." I walked over slowly. Chad's BMW sat in the employee parking area, rear bumper riding low. "Any place to park?" I said. Dean produced a tire iron from his toolbox. "Oops, looks like someone left their trunk unlocked." Inside were 2 cases of my 2015 Cabernet, the good stuff, still wearing my vineyard's labels. "Interesting," I said. "Better secure these before they walk away." Dean grinned. "Already on it, boss." Monday brought Chad back to the vineyard. Susan had scheduled a consultant review with the staff. Perfect timing. I gathered everyone in the main warehouse. 8 employees. Dean, Susan, and our wine expert, Chad. "Chad's going to share some insights about our operation," I announced. "Feel free to ask questions." Chad looked confident. Polo shirt pressed, smile practiced, hands steady. I started easy. "Chad, what's your take on our canopy management?" He nodded sagely. "Very important. The canopy needs proper management." The workers exchanged glances. Even our newest guy knew more than that. "And our bud break timing this year," I continued. "Right on schedule," Chad said. "Buds are breaking, as expected." Dean coughed. "Sir, bud break was 6 weeks ago." Chad's smile flickered. "Of course. I meant the secondary break." There was no secondary break. Every person in that room knew it. "A more question," I said. "What's your opinion on our malolactic fermentation process?" Chad paused. "Too long. It's, very malolactic." The staff was trying not to laugh. Susan looked like she wanted to disappear. "Thanks for that insight," I said. "Everyone back to work." Chad left 10 minutes later. Didn't even say goodbye. Tuesday, I made a discovery that changed everything. Susan's laptop, the one I'd locked her out of, had automatically backed up to our shared cloud drive. Inside was a folder marked Property Documents. The paperwork was there, all of it. Transfer agreements for not just the north parcel but 40 acres total, nearly half my vineyard. The signatures were mine, or close enough to fool a casual observer. But I knew my own handwriting. These were forgeries. I photographed everything, then made some calls. Found a lawyer in Sacramento who specialized in agricultural fraud. Discreet, experienced, expensive. "Mr. Harrington," he said after reviewing my evidence, "this is textbook wire fraud. Federal charges. What's the next step?" "I can forward this to the appropriate authorities. Anonymously, if you prefer." "I'd prefer." Wednesday, I had an idea. The Napa Valley Wine Association's annual tasting was coming up. Public event, local press, county officials always attended. Perfect venue for what I had in mind. I called the event coordinator. "This is Russell Harrington. I'd like to sponsor a booth this year." "Wonderful. We'd love to have Harrington Vineyard participate." "Great. I'll be showcasing our 2015 Cabernet Reserve." The whole collection, including the cases I'd retrieved from Chad's car. Friday afternoon, I made the call I'd been building toward for 2 weeks. "Napa County Sheriff's Office, how can I help you?" "I need to report financial fraud and theft," I said. "I have documentation." The detective's name was Martinez. Sounded tired, but thorough. "What kind of documentation?" "Bank records, forged signatures, inventory theft, property fraud, complete paper trail." "How complete?" "Enough to prosecute." Silence on the line. Then, "Can you come in Monday morning?" "I'll be there." Saturday night, Susan made dinner. Salmon, rice, asparagus, one of my favorites. "You've been working late," she said, pouring wine. "Busy time of year." Chad mentioned the staff meeting was interesting. I cut my salmon carefully. "Educational." "Rezel, I think there might be some misunderstanding about..." "About what?" She hesitated. "About Chad's role here. He's very qualified." "I'm sure he is." We ate in silence after that. Susan kept glancing at me, like she was trying to read my thoughts. Good luck with that. I'd learned to keep my cards close. Sunday morning, I walked the vineyard alone. Every vine I'd planted, every row I'd planned, every acre I'd fought to build. 20 years of work, of dreaming, planning, executing. They thought they could steal it with forged signatures and fake expertise. They were wrong. Monday was coming, the detective was waiting, the evidence was ready. In construction we have a saying, measure twice, cut once. I had been measuring for 2 weeks. Time to cut. The county auditor stepped through our gate as the fog lifted. Susan stood beside me, white as the sheets she hadn't slept in. "Mr. Harrington?" The woman was mid-40s, business suit, clipboard in hand. "I'm Janet Morrison, Napa County Business Compliance. We need to review your property and business records." Behind her stood 2 men in cheaper suits, the kind government investigators wear. "Of course," I said, "happy to cooperate." Susan's hand found my arm. Her grip was tight enough to leave marks. Is there a problem?" she asked. Morrison consulted her clipboard. "Routine audit. We've received some concerns about property transfer irregularities." "Some concerns." That was one way to put it. "Let's start with your business contracts and property deeds," Morrison said. I led them to the office. Susan followed, her heels clicking nervously on the hardwood. "Here's everything," I said, opening the filing cabinet. "Property records, business licenses, transfer agreements." Morrison spread the documents across my desk. "And where are the recent property transfer applications?" Susan's face went blank. "Transfer applications, the paperwork for subdividing the north parcel," one of the investigators said, "filed 3 weeks ago by your wine consultant." I don't know anything about that." Morrison looked at me. "Mr. Harrington, are you aware of these filings?" "First I've heard of it," I said. Complete truth. I'd known about the preliminary inquiry, not the actual filings. "And where is Mr. Chadmiller today?" Susan's mouth opened, then closed. "I'm not sure. He's consulting." Morrison made a note. "We'll need to speak with him." That's when we heard the car engine. Chad's BMW racing down the driveway, gravel spraying behind it. Interesting timing, Morrison said. One of the investigators spoke into his radio. Black BMW California plates, heading north on Silverado Trail. 10 minutes later, they had Chad pulled over. Searching his car was a formality at that point. The stolen wine was still in his trunk, along with a laptop bag full of documents that made Susan go even paler. "Mrs. Harrington," Morrison said, looking at the papers they'd brought back. "Can you explain these property transfer contracts with your signature?" Susan stared at the documents. I never signed those." "The handwriting analysis will determine that," Morrison said. "But right now we have some questions." That's when the sheriff's cars arrived. 3 of them, red and blue lights cutting through the morning fog. Detective Martinez stepped out of the lead car. "Mrs. Harrington, Mr. Miller, you're both under arrest." The Miranda rights sounded strange, echoing across my vineyard. Constitutional protections read among the vines I'd planted with my own hands. Chad tried to run, made it maybe 50 yards before 2 deputies tackled him near the equipment shed. Susan just stood there, like she was watching someone else's life fall apart. "Russell," she said, as they put the handcuffs on. "Russell, please." I didn't answer. What was there to say? The evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures, wire transfers, theft of business assets. Everything I'd documented, everything I'd preserved. They found the secret bank account, the missing wine inventory, the fraudulent property contracts. Chad had kept records of everything on his laptop, every transaction, every forged document, every plan to steal pieces of my vineyard. Some criminals are smart. Others document their own crimes. By Tuesday, the story was front-page news in the Napa Valley Register. Family Vineyard at center of fraud scandal, owners arrest, shock community. The article was thorough. Financial fraud, conspiracy, theft, multiple felony counts for both of them. Chad's bail was set at $200,000, 0 cents. Susan's at $150,000, 0 cents. Flight risk, the judge said. Scope of the crime. Neither of them made bail that week. The local news picked up the story Wednesday. Channel 7 ran it during the dinner hour. A Napa Valley vineyard owner and her alleged accomplice face multiple felony charges. I watched from my kitchen table. Didn't recognize the woman in the orange jumpsuit they showed being led into court. And the reporter mentioned my name. Russell Harrington, the vineyard owner, declined to comment, but has been cooperating fully with authorities. Cooperating. That was accurate. The phone rang constantly after that. Other reporters, neighbors, customers, asking questions. I let them all go to voicemail. Dean stopped by Thursday evening. Found me sitting on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the hills gold. "Hell of a thing, boss." "Yeah. You doing okay?" I considered the question. 25 years of marriage. Over. My wife facing prison time. My business name in the headlines. But the vineyard was safe. The truth was out. The thieves were caught. "I'm fine," I said, and meant it. Friday brought the indictments. Grand jury had heard the evidence, seen the documents. 12 felony counts between them. Wire fraud, conspiracy, theft of business assets, forgery. The prosecutor's office released a statement. This case represents a systematic attempt to defraud a legitimate business owner of his property and assets. Systematic, they got that right. Susan's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. Chad's lawyer did the same. But the evidence was too solid, too complete, too damning. The community knew the truth now. 20 years of building this vineyard, and they'd tried to steal it with forged papers and fake expertise. The civil suits would come later, restitution, damages, legal fees. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, I walked my rows as the stars came out. Every vine intact, every acre secure. Some structures collapse under pressure, others are built to last. I'd built mine to last. I walked the rows before sunrise, a glass of the last reserve in my hand. At the oldest vine, I emptied it into the soil and left the glass among the roots. I didn't say goodbye. I just listened as the valley exhaled, and I knew the ground was mine again. 3 months had passed since the arrests. The legal machinery ground forward with bureaucratic precision. Susan took a plea deal in week 10. 5 years, eligible for parole in 3. Chad got 7. His record wasn't as clean as we'd thought. The restitution hearing was scheduled for December. My lawyer said we'd recover most of what they'd stolen. Most. But the vineyard was safe. Every acre, every vine, every bottle. Dean knocked on my office door Tuesday morning. "Boss, got the harvest projections you wanted." I'd promoted him to vineyard manager the week after the arrests. 20 years of loyalty earned him that much. "How's it looking?" "Best crop we've had in 5 years. The vines are happy." Vines don't lie. They respond to care, to attention, to being left alone to do what they do best. Unlike people. "Dean, I want you to take the lead on the spring plantings. Your call on varietals." His face lit up. "You sure about that?" "Dead sure." He'd earned the trust. More than earned it. The guest house stood empty now. I walked past it every morning, every evening. Never went inside. Some monuments are better left untouched. The windows were dark, the door locked, exactly how it should be. What happened there belonged to the past. What mattered was what came next. Saturday afternoon, I found myself in the wine cellar, the 2015 Cabernet section where everything started. 3 bottles remained, the last of the vintage Susan and Chad had tried to steal. I pulled one from the rack. Good wine. Maybe great wine, the kind you save for special occasions. This felt special enough. I walked back to the oldest section of the vineyard, the first vines I'd planted when I bought this land. Ancient rootstock, New World dreams. The core came out clean. The wine smelled like earth and time and possibility. I poured it slowly into the soil around the base of the vine, dark red against dark earth, like blood returning to the body. The empty bottle went into the ground beside it, not buried, placed, like a marker. No ceremony, no words, just a quiet acknowledgement that some things end so other things can begin. The community had rallied around the vineyard after the scandal. Orders increased, visitors came by to offer support. "Hell of a thing," they'd say. "Good for you for fighting back." But I hadn't fought back. I just documented the truth and let it speak for itself. Truth has a weight to it. Eventually it settles where it belongs. Monday brought new business inquiries. Tuesday, a wine magazine wanted an interview. I declined the interview. Let the wine speak for itself. Dean hired 2 new workers for the spring season. Young guys, eager to learn, reminded me of myself 20 years ago. Full of plans, full of hope. The vineyard would outlast all of us. The vines, the soil, the seasons. They'd continue long after we were gone. That's the thing about building something real. It doesn't depend on you to survive. Wednesday evening, I sat on the front porch with a glass of the 2018 Pinot, watching the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky every shade of gold. The phone didn't ring. The house was quiet. The land was secure. For the first time in months, maybe years, everything was exactly as it should be. Tomorrow, Dean and I would walk the rows together, plan the spring pruning, discuss new plantings, check the equipment. Normal work, honest work. The kind that built something worth keeping. I finished my wine as the stars came out, rinsed the glass in the kitchen sink, turned off the lights. The valley breathed around me, ancient and patient and enduring. My valley, my vines, my ground. Wine again.